Hello, this is Sarah from Lebu Sewing Center here again, and I want to talk about piping feet. So Brother and Babylock make 3 piping feet. They make the Pearl and Piping Foot, the Piping Foot Left, and the Mini Piping Foot. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about the Mini Piping Foot. So what makes these piping feet different? The differences are the size of the piping that you can make. So the left piping foot and the mini piping foot that we'll be talking about today, they're going to make piping up to 2 millimeters wide. So it's pretty small. I've got some small piping over here, and the Pearl and Piping Foot foot is going to make piping up to 1/4 inch. So much thicker, more substantial piping. We do have a video on the Pearl and Piping Foot, so if you're looking for something that is a little bit thicker than what I'm going to be showing you here today, that's what you would want to look for. The concept behind making piping with the feet is exactly the same. We are going to be using the feet in this video to make the piping. You can also install pre-made piping, and that will be in a separate video. Today we're going to show you how easy it is to actually make piping. So to start with, I need to pick the foot, and so I've done the mini piping foot. The other thing that I need to do is I need to have my cording, and I need to make sure that the cording is going to fit underneath the foot. So I can see that that's going to ride under here, no problem. And then I like to use bias fabric. So I have created some bias fabric here. It has a lot of stretch. That's going to make it easier when I'm sewing so that I don't get any weird stretches or sort of wrinkles or pleats while I'm sewing that. And so I don't typically iron my piping piece. I'm just going to fold it in half. You do want to make sure that your piping is longer than the piece of material that you have, because until it's like tacked down on the edge or sewn into something, it's really easy to pull the piping right out. So I have my knee lift installed on my machine here, so I'm able to keep my hands sort of where I need them to be. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just lining the fabric and the piping inside. I'm pushing the piping over to the left, and I've got it riding in the groove that is on the foot here. So right now I'm just making sure I've got it in the groove in the back of the foot, because that's going to help. So the next thing that I need to do, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit closer so that you can see. Here we go. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to move my needle position. So I'm going to turn my hand wheel so that you can see where my needle is right now. If you were paying close attention, you can see, so this is the edge where the piping is, and right now my needle would be going right through my piping. So I actually need to move my needle position over, and I need to shift it to the right. So I'm going to use the button on my machine. In this particular instance, it is a left-right shift, and I'm going to move that over until it clears the piping. So where is the sweet spot? How do I know? So because most of the time we don't just make piping to make piping, we're making the piping because we want to insert it in something. So how I like to make that is, we're thinking about piping, we think about nice tightly wrapped cord with our fabric. So when I go to put this in my final project, what I don't want to happen is I don't want my previous stitching line to be showing through. So I'm going to work basically from the right to the left when I'm talking about piping. So while I need my piping to be made here, I want to make sure that I'm not using the needle position, my final needle position. Each time I go to insert the piping into my project, I want to bring my needle a little closer to the piping so that I don't see the previous line stitching. So I know that I can make this tighter, but I'm going to work on making it a little bit thicker so that I have some maneuverability. So what I have done here is I have moved my needle position to the 5.75 position here. So I am working on a Brother Luminaire. That would be the same setting on a Babylock Solaris. That setting might be a little bit different on your sewing machine. So you're going to do exactly what I did. You're just going to keep moving your needle up or down so that you can see when you get to the sweet spot. And you will sort of figure that out. Because once you've made a piece of piping this size, that number isn't going to vary unless you're using some substantially thicker fabric. So I'm just going to use my little stiletto here to help keep everything going. And you want to make sure that you're not pulling on this fabric here, or you're cording, because this is bias and we don't want to stretch it. We just want this to feed through nice and evenly. And I'm not going to be too concerned if the material underneath shifts ever so slightly. So if this part here doesn't stay perfect, I'm not going to be that concerned, because I am going to be trimming that down later. So when you're getting everything together and you're making sure that you're keeping everything in place, you do want to make sure that you don't pull so much on your cording that you actually pull it out. And again, I'm just making sure that I'm keeping everything to the back. I've got everything nice and tight over here. I like to use my stiletto just to make sure that that stays in place. Now that I finished, go ahead and cut that out. I am going to make that a little bit wider. And here is my piping. And so I do have a little bit of wiggle room in here, because when I actually go to place this piping in my border, in my binding, wherever it is that I'm going to put it on, I need to be able to have the ability to move my needle position over so that it actually tightens up. So I want to make sure that that's not so tight that I can't do that. So I started with a strip of material that was 2.5 inches wide, and it was cut on the bias. I am going to trim this down. And I'm going to use a tool called the Piping Hot Binding Tool, and there will be a separate video for that. It does have a 1/4 inch and a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and it has a groove underneath it that's going to make this really easy to trim down. But that is how you make piping. And so we're using the mini piping foot, which is the piping foot in the center today, and we have made a really cool piece of piping. And if you want to see how this is inserted, look for the video on inserting piping. Thanks, guys.